Jillian Michaels, thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
You are
I'll drink my water.
amazing. Big fan of yours. And
Likewise.
and also we're new friends, but we're fast friends. We got to speak at that historic Senate panel in America, which was so fun, such an honor for me, and so fun getting to know you. And then we recorded on your podcast. I'm super excited for that to come out. But now the tables have turned. I'm excited to get to know you better on my show.
It's not that exciting.
Very exciting.
I don't want to disappoint you, Max.
I'm very excited. You're a living legend.
Yes, that's me.
But let's dive right in. So obviously you've transformed countless lives through fitness. You've been doing this for some time. But I feel like this is a juicy place to start. What's one myth about health or weight loss that drives you absolutely crazy, and why do you think it persists?
Oh, gosh. The calories don't count. Mother of God. Why do I think it persists? Because there's money in selling somebody some new fad diet. But they do count. So even if you factor in these foods are more thermogenic and they're going to boost your metabolism, well, that all folds into calories in, calories out. It drives me mental. And then you get into these conversations about things like GLP-1 drugs, Ozempic, tirzepatide, whatever. And it's like, oh, you can't, don't even bother trying to eat less and move more because that just doesn't work. I'm like, well, what do these drugs do to facilitate weight loss? Well, it helps you control appetite. I'm like, I can't. It's been decades of the same shit. Now, if you want to get into why it's so difficult to keep the weight off, that has nothing to do with calories, right? That's all psychological, in my opinion. But that one just drives me bananas. Bananas.
Yeah. Well, another really interesting thing about these GLP-1 agonists is that they actually increase insulin. So for that whole myth that like carbs are inherently fattening, that low carb or keto diets are the only path to fat loss. Well, and usually like some insulinogenic mechanism is invoked, right? But these drugs actually raise insulin,
right? And
yet people lose dramatic weight on them.
Max, I got nothing. It goes back to the same conversation. And the one thing that I like to cite often is the Twinkie diet. You've heard about that?
No.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, it's awesome. So there's a professor of nutrition. I think his name is Mark Haub. And it could be Mark Taub, forgive me, but I'm pretty sure it's Mark Haub. And I've cited it about 100 times and I just refuse to remember. I don't know why. And he ate nothing but garbage, hence the concept of the Twinkie diet. He was in a food desert, ate nothing but shit for, I think it was 10 weeks, and lost about 27 pounds and improved all of his biomarkers. Now, I'm not advocating for Twinkies, obviously. But the point that he was making is that a calorie is a unit of energy. Now, the nutrients in that equation, where the nutrients and the calories intersect in your Venn diagram with regard to your overall health is a different conversation. But he lost 27 pounds because he ate less calories, less units of energy. And then by lowering his overall body weight, all the other biomarkers did improve. Now, skinny people get cancer and skinny people get diabetes, but it's far better to be smaller and eating less shit than bigger and eating more of it, if that makes sense.
Totally. What would you say the difference is between, you've got, in either hand, you've got 100 calories worth of eggs and 100 calories worth of Twinkies. What's the how
nutrients, in my opinion, right? Nutrients. So one's filled with poison and one's filled with nutrients. And how that's going to impact your metabolism over time, like sure, it will impact your metabolism, but that still comes into you're burning more calories. It's still the same conversation. It's still calories in, calories out. And if you're going to incorporate being your healthiest self, not getting diabetes, not getting heart disease, not getting cancer, not getting dementia, like the top 4 things that kill Americans, arguably people around the globe, then yeah, you're going to want the eggs and not the Twinkies. However, if we had to baby step someone, and this is how I kind of look at different fad diets like carnivore. Well, if you compare carnivore to the standard American diet, yeah, it's going to be a hell of a lot better. Do I personally think it's better than a diet that has no plants? No. So if you gave me a diet that was high fiber, lots of plants, and high protein, that makes a lot of sense to me. I've witnessed a ton of information and studies that suggest that's an optimal way forward. So 2 Twinkies terrible. One Twinkie, better. No Twinkies and eggs, amazing. But I'll just fucking take the one Twinkie if that's where we're starting.
You've seen so many diet fads come and go, I'm sure, over the course of your career. What's your current, like paint a picture for us with regards to your current dietary philosophy?
Whole foods, as chemical free as possible, and calorie control. That's it. I try not to overeat. And when you eat whole foods, you kind of don't inherently. When you eat whole foods, I had an interesting podcast with Dr. Robin Chetkan, who's a gastroenterologist. I'm not sure if you've met her.
Yeah.
Really cool
I got
lady.
to speak with her recently at Eudaimonia in Florida. She moderated a panel that I was on. She's like a gut health
Yes.
doctor. Yeah.
Okay. Max, you should interview her. She was telling me in this one show we did together that the more you eat your vegetables, the more the microbes in your gut essentially improve your taste buds or make the vegetables taste better and increase your cravings for those healthy foods. I can't explain the mechanism, but I promise you that she's quite qualified to do that for you. And I'll tell you that I don't really, like, my wife made green beans last night with some Parmesan cheese, and we had a rotisserie chicken and some sort of, I don't know, tomato bean salad thing. And it all tasted amazing. My kids wanted to throw up. And I was like, what's wrong with you guys? Like, this tastes incredible. So whole foods, I eat all three macros in what I believe to be their most ideal form. I don't eat processed foods.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And it inherently makes me not overeat. So I just think it's common sense. I don't think you need to really fine tune it, although you could, right? If you wanted to get crazy and you're a performance athlete or whatever it is that you want to live to 300 years old and you wanted to be perfect, sure. But I think those simple things of don't overeat, eat whole foods, and try to really remove those chemicals whenever possible, I think you're going to win there. You sleep, you move your body if you ideally 4 to 5 times a week, but that'd take 3.5 hours if that's all I got. And the step goal, you've got your walking pad over there. That simple shit, I think, goes a really long way. I think it's 90% of the fight.
Totally. Well, have you changed your mind recently?
Two things. Okay. And one, I got to give this one. I know that he's extremely unpopular in some cases, but I have to give it to Layne Norton that he came after me guns blazing several years ago because someone had asked me, how much protein do we really need? So I had a PhD that I've worked with for years, and I was like, hey, doc, I got this question. How much protein, like, what do you think? I always say 30%, but what's the actual 30% of my daily calories? What's the answer, though? Because I eat a different amount than someone else. Is it 1 gram per pound of body weight? Like, I never pay attention to it, but what would you say? So she sends me to the American Medical Association, and it's something ridiculous, like I can't even remember, 0.8 grams per kilo or something absurd.
That's like the bare minimum.
It's the bare minimum. So I was like, I get, and I was following the work of David Sinclair and David Sabatini because I was really into all that longevity stuff at the time. Not that I'm not, but there's some of it I think is now more questionable, like this. So the argument was, do you need all these amino acids, especially if you're not working out constantly, aggressively all the time? Is it going to impact your mTOR pathway, right? And prevent your body from culling dead and senescent tissue, because mTOR is always in build mode, never in breakdown mode. I'm butchering the shit out of this, but you get the gist of it. So made perfect sense to me. I was like, we don't need this much. Oh my God, fuck me. If this guy did not rip me asshole to elbow, am I allowed to swear here? I'm so sorry. Yes. And I was like, you're not even coming after me. You're coming after this PhD and that PhD and this PhD and the American Medical Association. Like, you want to come after me, but like, this is. So of course I had him on the show, and he made sense to me, and he was breaking down why a lot of those studies were biased and how there was no risk to bone density. That was bullshit, and the kidney thing was bullshit, and the mTOR thing was bullshit. And I was still somewhat skeptical. And then you saw Rhonda Patrick come out and say the same things, and Peter Attia come out and say the same things, and then new research come out and say the same things, and that the ways they used to measure how many amino acids we would lose to gauge how much protein we needed was dated. And so I was wrong about that. And I am actually grateful to him for doing that. I was wrong. I'm glad that he came on and opened my eyes and allowed me to shift positions on that. And then the second thing, and I can't even believe I'm freaking saying this, And okay. So there's been new research, and I'm familiar with it only because of this microplastic situation and these forever chemicals, that you can get rid of some of it through sweating. I just was like, no, that can't be. For years, I'm like, that's bullshit. You don't detox the body through sweating. Like, it's liver. And I had a million doctors tell me that's bullshit. And it seems like it may not be bullshit.
That you can actually detox through that. Sweating it's a major route of detoxification.
I always thought it was bullshit.
Why? Why do you think that?
Because a million doctors were like, that's not how the body detoxes. That's how the body cools itself. And it's predominantly like the liver and the lungs and this and that, the kidneys that do these different jobs. It's not sweating. And I was like, that's all bullshit.
Sometimes sweat is the best way for certain of these compounds. I mean, there's literally like blood, urine, sweat studies. Anybody can Google them, where they look at recovery of various xenobiotic toxins, like in blood, urine, sweat.
Over the years, the narrative changes and the studies change too. That's the part that's really annoying. And our mutual friend, Jason Karp, was on. I know he was just on your show. And it was explained to me how one study says, too much protein's bad for mTOR and its kidneys and fucks up your kidneys, and you'll lose bone mass, bone density, and this, that, the other. And then the other one says, no, it's the best thing you can do for aging. And his theory, or not his theory, this is what he does, or used to do, was simply that you can find anything you want if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
All the covariables and cofactors.
100%. I think the saying goes like, torture the data long enough and it'll tell you anything you want.
Right. That's so well said. That is it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Particularly in the field of nutrition, where like I feel like the data tends to be overwhelmingly weak.
Every 5 seconds, someone's messaging me. They're like, am I drinking coffee or am I not drinking coffee? I'm like, you're fine to drink fucking coffee. Have like 2 cups a day. Try to make it organic because of the mold and the pesticides, this, that. You'll be okay. But dairy, it causes snot. I'm like, that's not true. It does not cause snot. Dr. So-and-so said that. And I won't name Dr. So-and-so, but one of the fucking Dr. So-and-sos, who's a pretty big doctor, did say it. And it's totally not true.
I know. Don't you think it's important that I feel like science communicators disclose like their own biases, like, if I'm taking dietary advice from somebody, I want to know what diet they're on, because if they're like a vegan,
I know
that's going to be, if they're on one of these extreme diets, like
right.
That's going to.
I don't have a diet. That's the good news, is I never wrote a diet book. There is no Jillian Michaels diet. So I'll go wherever I think is optimal. But it always comes back to kind of common sense. Another thing that, I guess because I was just cutting this damn show, that Jason was talking about is when he looked at the data. Okay, so the paleo diet, right? I was always like, well, this doesn't even make any freaking sense. Like, you didn't even have avocados back in Paleolithic times. Like, there were cyanide capsules. We had to farm this shit. We had to make this stuff over decades. And everybody around the world ate different things. Like, this is a complete lie. And Jason really tied that together so succinctly when he said, I studied ancestral diets, and, over here, the Inuit people are eating whale blubber, and over in the rainforest, they're eating like insects and fruit. But the theme was the same, like real food, whole food, no chemicals, hunting and gathering for the food. And then the outcomes were identical. And that's a tough one to argue with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's like super smart. I mean, you can find anybody on social media these days to gaslight you about pretty much everything. But
yeah, I know.
To me, that makes intuitive sense. Like, I think any reasonable human would be hard pressed to argue against getting back to basics when it comes to nutrition.
I hope so. That's what I try to claw it back to, is the bare minimum, and then build from there.
Yeah.
When I was younger, it was such a different person. So much happier. Big dreams. It was like, you can't just take the stairs. What the fuck's the matter with you? You're capable of so much more than the stairs. This is a lie. They're selling you apathy. Now I'm like, listen, why don't we start with the stairs? A little step goal, get you a walking path. One Twinkie, not two Twinkies. Because you see the vulnerability in people and the fact that the system is absolutely rigged against them, making it so much harder, so much harder. So while I would love, 4 or 5 workouts a week, and you eat all organic and you eat all whole food, and I would love all that stuff, I'll start with the one Twinkie and the friggin' step goal.
Yeah, I like that. Let's take it back. What inspired you to pursue a career in fitness and wellness?
Accident. I was an overweight kid, and my mom got me into martial arts when I was 12. And it was a process of losing weight over the course of about 5 years. And then when I was 17, I was training for my black belt, and I had graduated high school early. Unfortunately, not because I'm a genius, but simply because my birthday fell in like a weird month. So people were coming up to me in the gym and asking me like how much I cost, like how much do you charge? And I was thinking like, for what? And they thought I was a trainer. And I wondered like, I wonder how much I could make doing this. I think I was making like $5 an hour delivering pizzas and barbecue from this little strip mall where these 2 family-run businesses shared me as an employee. They were very sweet, actually. Anyway, nevertheless, I was like, I wonder if I can make $15 an hour. And my mom, thank God, being the voice of reason, was like, honey, this is great. I think you need some sort of credential. So she got me my first little certification. Oh. And when you do what you love, what is it, Oscar Wilde, the universe sort of conspires on your behalf. So it just flowed. It was effortless. I got a bunch of clients and I made great money and I was super happy. And there was a detour, which if you want to cover that detour, we can. But nevertheless, I fell into it very organically and by accident.
Was the detour what, the TV show?
No. So the detour is that at about 24 years old, I started dating somebody who worked in the entertainment industry who was older. And she's like, you can't be a 30-year-old trainer. Like, what are you going to do with your life? And that had never occurred to me. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I was bartending at night. I was training during the day. I was making fistfuls of cash. I was so happy. And she's like, yeah, you can't be like 30 years old and fucking tights. Meanwhile, 50 years old and tights. Not often these days, but it happens. So I end up taking a job in the entertainment industry, and I find my way over to a talent agency, which was, I don't even think they were run anymore, ICM. I think they folded into CAA, I think, Creative Artists Agency, I think. So I worked there for 3 years, and I never made less money, and I was never more unhappy. And long story short, I got caught up in this whole political thing between these 2 bigwigs at the agency and kicked out of the industry for life. One guy had embezzled a packaging fee on Gangs of New York. So this is so much, cut all of this if you want to, but the long story short is managers get a producing fee, agents get a packaging fee, and he took stock in the production company, and I was the guy's freaking assistant, so I knew what happened. And another one of the people at the company was like, listen, I promoted you. Where's that money? What actually happened? So I told him, my old boss renegotiates his contract. I'm fired on Monday and never to work in the business again. Blacklisted, dead to the world, 27 years old, have just wasted 3 years of my life doing this. And I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do, man? Oh my God. Like, I have a few cents to scrape up out of the couch to buy gas. But what am I going to do? So I go work at a sports medicine facility, putting towels and ice packs and TENS units on people. And then I ended up working, I can never remember this, despite the fact that I ended up owning my own facility as an aide. One of them needs a degree. I think the assistant needs a degree. But you can work under the direct supervision as a trainer of a chiropractor or a physical therapist as long as they're literally directly supervising you, or they're on the premises and you have kind of the chart. So I start doing that and I fall back into training. And all of a sudden I'm waking up happy again for the first time in 3 years. And now I'm thinking, okay, but I can't actually be a 30-year-old trainer, so what do I do? So I learned that business, and at 30, I opened up my own sports medicine facility, and I hired the physical therapist and the physiatrist, and then I worked under their license, and of course had chiropractor and massage therapist, what have you, cut to, I learned a lot about business at ICM and a lot about branding at ICM. And all those agents were coming to my gym. So one of them, who I'd worked with at ICM, was like, there's this show at NBC. You should really go out for it. It's called The Biggest Loser. And I was like, oh, fuck no. The Biggest Loser? No, thanks. And he's like, no, really, I think you should go. What do you have to lose? Like, they want to brand 2 trainers. So the long and the short of it is he sends me into NBC. And I think because I just was so skeptical and aloof, like they ended up casting me. And the rest is kind of history.
Wow. And the show hadn't been airing yet, right?
Nope. Brand new.
It was brand new.
Brand new. For better and worse.
And this was a time when those kinds of shows were just like everybody in America was tuning in.
They were also awful. So let's be clear. There were shows like The Swan, like you're too young for this, but horrible kind of like make fun of people. I don't even really remember that show myself, but it was like these makeover shows where it's like, oh, you're so ugly, but look, we fixed you. This show is not meant to be a weight loss show. That's why the inherent flaws with regard to the weight loss of people going home in a week, people going home in 2 weeks, not having a therapist on the show. It was supposed to be a weight loss show. It was supposed to be like, look at the overweight person trying to resist the temptations in the house. Isn't that funny? And then I have to give, we don't get along. We have a lot of differing ideas, but I have to give Bob Harper credit simply because I'll never forget I was having a meltdown about the way things were season 1. And I'm flipping over the temptations in the house because they just put shit food everywhere to fuck with the contestants and spitting in them. And I was 30. And the showrunner, he's like, you're never going to work again. I'm like, what are you going to do? You're going to call the fucking soccer moms in Los Angeles? Like, fuck you, man. A lot has changed. Some things have changed. So anyway, Bob was 10 years older than me, pulled me aside. And he's like, listen, calm down. He goes, we're going to do what we do and it's going to work and you're going to see. So stop getting caught up in all of this nonsense and just do what you do. And when these guys ended up losing like 100 pounds in 8 weeks, all of a sudden the producers were like, oh my God, look how inspirational our show is. But the flaws are still there because you built a Mack truck and then tried to pretend that it was a Ferrari. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Well, it's like the difference between a diet and a lifestyle. It's like these people were on these diets for the sake of the spectacle, but everybody knows that, it's become lore now within the fitness, obesity, nutrition community that many of these contestants ended up going on to read.
Let me say this. Yeah. So here's the one thing I will say about this. The reality of this, because I promise you no one knows this better than me. And in fact, I was so sick of hearing it. I have an episode coming out on New Year's Day with a lot of contestants that kept the weight off. But 35% of the contestants that I worked with kept the weight off. Now, in real life, 95% of the people that lose a large amount of weight put it back on. So the reality is you're doing way better than the people that weren't on the show from a percentage perspective, from a statistical perspective. And of course, when they come on, they'll tell you exactly what happened when they went home. It comes out New Year's Day. And the ones that gained it all back will tell you exactly why. And I can tell you exactly why. Because here's the reality, Max. I can sit here and say, eat less, move more. I can do that with you over a year and we can do a pound a week. Or I can do it with you over a couple of months and we can do 10 pounds a week. And both will work. But the people on that show are not showing up because of the things you and I would traditionally deal with. Like, what are you eating? What? No, this is not enough macros. And what is that? There's no nutrients in that. And that has red foot. Fuck, no. They're on the show because their entire family died in a car accident. This one's on the show because her mother was a heroin addict and used to turn tricks while she was locked in a closet for her next fix on drugs. This one's on the show because his father was shot in front of him when he was 5 years old. Like, this is the shit. And this one's on the show because she was incested by her uncle. Oof. I'm not even exaggerating to you. And that's all the stuff that for the large part, the audience never saw because it was far too dark to show anyone. And the food is affording them something so deep and so significant, and it's so unconscious. So I'll give you an example that we all know this one, because I think this is pretty cliche, and not that the issue is cliche, it's disgusting, but we've all heard it before. A girl's incested or molested, raped, what have you, and she eats to desexualize herself and create a barrier, right? We've all kind of heard that one. Food is a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism, so on and so forth. But it's far more nuanced than that. So there was a kid on the show named Austin. He was 18. He showed up with his dad. He wasn't even my contestant. But Bob and I used to actually work with each other's people all the time. And we were pretty good about that, because it's like whatever we can do to work together to get these people where they need to go. So they all go home for the holidays. They weren't eliminated. They all come back. And it's kind of like on the show, they would pretend like, how'd you do at home? Like just a social experiment, but really it was Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever the hell it was. So they come back, everybody's weighing in, and most of them did great. 5 pounds, 4 pounds, 3 pounds, 7 pounds. Ken, Austin's dad, gets on the scale and he lost nothing. Austin gets on the scale and he gained like 5 pounds. And immediately all the other contestants start to kind of co-sign the bullshit of it's very hard while you're traveling, and you can't find healthy food at the airport, and I'm like, oh my God, all of you shut the fuck up. So the next day I sit down with Austin and I'm like, just walk me through from the moment you left to the moment you got back. And then we get the narrative, right? There's no healthy food and I couldn't work out, and all the excuses. I'm like, yeah, I got it. Okay, then you're here. Yep. And then you're at the snack thing, and okay, yeah. And now you're home. Okay, now you're home. What happens? Well, all my friends and family are there, and my mom's there. I'm like, what happens? And the door flies open. In walks Austin and his dad, both about 100 pounds lighter, and mom starts sobbing. Not tears of joy, because mom is morbidly obese. And upon seeing her much thinner, fitter, healthier husband and son, it's like, you broke the contract. You're abandoning me. You're leaving me behind. Like, we all were in this together. And obviously, it's not an established narrative. It's this unconscious agreement. So what does she do? She becomes depressed. She withdraws. So what does Austin do? Well, he starts eating with his mom again. So what does the food afford Austin? A primal connection to his mother. And what happens when the food goes away? A primal abandonment. You need a real, Max, I think, beyond years of psychoanalysis to get to the bottom of it. And my mom has her doctorate in psychoanalysis. And she will tell you it is one of the hardest things to help people with. And this is where I am hopeful for things like psychedelics, because when I had interviewed Matt Johnson on his work with smoking cessation at Johns Hopkins, he had like an 85% success rate. And I wondered, could you utilize these plant medicines to help people with these issues? And we still don't know. There hasn't been a study done. Like, it's my fantasy to do one, to try it out in real time. But that is the honest answer. Because lifestyle, fucking don't eat the second Twinkie.
Yeah.
Honey, it's not brain science. It's not brain surgery. It's,
You're right.
It's the deeper stuff.
Well, among the 35, you said 35% were able to sustain the weight loss?
Of the people I worked with.
Of the people that you worked with.
So you got to figure, I think I did 10 seasons. Oh, and keep this in mind. I think I did about 10 seasons, even though the show was on for longer. I was off and on because of my issues with the show. And I probably had 12 contestants a season, maybe a little more. So maybe I had 150 people. And obviously you got to remember, some go home in a week. Some go home in 2, some go home in 3. But given that number, I'd tell you probably a little over a third have kept it off.
Wow.
And I was so sick of hearing it that I have Michelle Aguilar on, and Pete Thomas on, and Hannah and Olivia on, all former contestants coming on in January, because I'm like, this is such bullshit. Tell people what really happened and what it was like for you when you came home, and how you keep the weight off now, and why you think the others haven't. And that's it. I'm telling you, we can say the system has rigged it, and they have. In other words, you and I have, at that Senate hearing, for example, have espoused the fact that big ag and big food, they fund the research, they shape the policy, they craft the narrative, they engineer the environment, and they manipulate consumer behavior. And they have a staff of multidisciplinary scientists who manipulate the food so that it's hyper addictive and you can't stop eating. And yet, some of us are 50 pounds overweight. We're not 100, 200, 300 pounds overweight. So it definitely hijacks your biology, but it exploits your psychology, and some are more vulnerable than others for these reasons.
So what would you say then are the mindset differences between those that were able to keep the weight off that differentiated them from those that were unable to keep the weight off?
So if we look at somebody like Pete, who's amazing, he was one of my guys from season two. It was like 15 years ago maybe. And this kid was a foster kid, starving as a child, would have to go door to door with his younger siblings begging for food, literally. So of course, what happens when he gets older? Well, he eats until he can't stop eating. It's like, I didn't have food, now I have food. All of it, like fill the void, control how much food he has, all of this stuff. But when Pete went home, he's not losing something new. So in other words, what is Austin losing? He's losing a connection with his mom, and that's current. That's a fucking problem. Pete now is like, okay, I see that I was a victim at this time. And when they develop this coping mechanism with food, my mom will tell you that it is literally their psychological survival. Just like an alcoholic would probably tell you the same, right? Like, I would have killed myself if I couldn't medicate with alcohol. So while it was a catastrophe for me, I'd probably be dead if I didn't have that crutch at the time. But then it stops serving you, right? And then you're perpetuating the abuse yourself. So now you were once a victim, but you move into this place of taking that thing that was holding you together, and then it starts to become that which nourishes me also destroys me. With Pete, okay, so we can deal with the pain of his childhood, his mother, his this, his that, but there's no current loss that he experiences. It's working through old pain. This is currently happening in Austin's house. One of the top reasons that people cite, for abandoning a weight loss regimen is issues with a spouse. Think about that. So what's happening? There's some sort of abandonment. There's some sort of loss. It's something they're currently going to lose. Now, if somebody has been molested or raped, it's tougher because there's still the fear of, if I lose this weight, like, will it happen again? But Pete doesn't have to worry about starving again. So that's a bit easier. If they can go into an environment that they can control, and they can control their relationships. So, for example, Michelle Aguilar and Danny Allen and Tara Costa and Hannah Olivia, all people who are doing great. Julie Haddon, I encourage you go check them out on Instagram because I couldn't have them all on the show. Literally, they're like zooming in one at a time. So I couldn't have them all. So go check them out on Instagram. They're adults. They had a supportive spouse who was in it with them. The husbands got healthy. The wives got healthy. They could have been single. They could have met someone new. So not only did they have the support that they needed, they didn't have the pushback. And honestly, some of the trauma is just worse than others. There's Shay, there's this one contestant who I love, and she's just like such a fucking amazing human. And this is the one whose mother used to turn tricks for heroin, and she now works with foster kids, and she's got great relationships in her life, but we're still not there. And up, down, a lot of pain.
Well, how do you address the trauma then? I mean, is it within your scope to like call in a therapist or like a...
What I was able to do in my limited capacity, and by the way, I made quite a few mistakes, which is important to say, and I'll give you an example. So I know what I'm looking for. I lived through some of these things with my own father. Part of the reason I ate was to identify with my father, to feel connected to my father, to bond over food with my father because we were very estranged. So not only do I understand it on a personal level, I also understand it. What's the word I'm looking for? Like literally, I understand why they're doing it. I get not the science behind it, but the psychology behind it. So I can see pretty quickly, right? I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay. So they'll tell you their story and you're like, oh, okay. Got it. It doesn't take a genius. And once you know, oh, the food's providing them with something, they don't even realize it because it's unconscious. What is that thing? Tell me your story. Oh, fuck. Got it. Okay. So I can help them see it, but you have to understand that helping them see it is like the tip of that iceberg. Helping them work through the trauma, first of all, it takes quite a bit of time. And there's a reason people like my mom have their doctorate in it. So some of them are better able to, because they're ready as well, and you've given them other tools, and better able to see it and not defend against it too much, which I'll get to in just a moment, and do the work because they feel a bit safer and the pain is less deep. And that part I was great at. And you saw plenty of those montages on Biggest Loser. You'd see about a minute long, but the talks would go on for 3 hours all week long. And that part I could handle. But not having the appropriate training to do this kind of work, first of all, you can open up a can of worms and then send somebody home with it. And that's bad. They need to go home and have the support. And this is all shit you learn in the free fall. Like you think you're like, oh, Max, I see what's wrong. Let me fucking show you what's the matter. And then they go home and they're like, oh my God, my mom ran over my brother with the car. This is true. Killed my brother and blamed me because I didn't warn her that my brother was behind the car. So I fucking hate the shit out of my mother. And then I feel guilty that I hate my mother. And then I'm going to eat like crazy because of it. And now I'm going to project my mother onto you, Jillian. This was Sione and Felipe, who were Bob's contestants. Worst mistake. Oh my God. These two boys hated me unlike anything I have ever, like any other contestants that have ever hated me on that show. And it is a weight loss show, but I mean, give me a fucking, like they hated me. And I had to open this door with one of them who was not ready to look at any of this. He was irresponsible. I didn't know better. And it was like, you just bring up the devil and they don't want to see the devil. There's a reason it's unconscious. It takes years for people to deal with that stuff in therapy with the appropriate therapist doing the appropriate work. And then what? You're going to go home and be like, now what the fuck do I do with this mess? And they project. So you become the bad mommy. And I wasn't equipped to understand that at the time either. So while I became very good at what I did, there's a lot of learning, and that scenario is not normal. It doesn't exist in real life. So, Max, those are the flaws. It has nothing to do with like, well, they didn't eat enough food. Yes, they did. You can't start. What's the difference if I give them fucking 500 calories or 1,000, 500 a pound a week? Like, who gives a fuck? That doesn't matter. It's, they're walking 10 hours a day. Like they're burning 8,000 calories a day. It's shaving a few hundred calories a day. It's not what's happening. This is the shit. You want to know what's serious? But this was the stuff.
Well, it's the underlying trauma. It's the underlying beliefs that are driving behavior. If you're just focused on addressing the behavior, you're putting the cart before the horse. Why do you think food is so commonly used as a coping mechanism?
A couple different reasons. It's accessible. It's affordable. It's
pleasurable.
It's not. Okay, but so's, I don't know, pick a drug. My body doesn't actually react well to drugs, but for some people, I can't like, get so sick. Can't handle it. Like if you gave me a weed gummy, I'd be on your fucking floor. Like, you're like, good night, Max. I'll wake up tomorrow. Can't handle it physically. But nevertheless, for most people, a couple drinks, a weed gummy or whatever the fuck, sex with strangers. I don't know. Pick your addiction, right? That stuff's also pleasurable, destructive, but pleasurable when used inappropriately. So I think the reason you'll see maybe more of it than fentanyl use, although that seems to be a huge problem. But I would argue that obesity is bigger when 74% of the country is overweight or obese. It's because it's not really taboo. It's totally accessible. We have to eat all the time. It's cheap and affordable. It's the one thing that you can do for yourself throughout the day. So like you hate your life and you hate your day and you live for everybody else. But that donut store that you hit in the morning on the way to work that lights up the dopamine center of your brain, that's for you. And it doesn't take away from anyone else. You're still able to parent your kids. You're not like, there's not a needle hanging out of your arm when you're putting them to sleep at night. Like it doesn't have the same gravity of like, whoa, I am really on a one-way path, to the fucking end of the road, to real trouble. So it's just so accessible and so accepted and so omnipresent and highly palatable and addictive by design.
Yeah. Well, what's the solution then? I mean, is it to find something to replace it with, or?
It's multifactorial. So solution one is, yes, we got to hit it obviously from the simple science of like, how about let's start with one Twinkie, right? Like, can we start with a step goal? Can we get these basic steps going so you start to see some progress? Simultaneously, can we manage your behavior and practice cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which is a Band-Aid, but still helpful. In other words, like, let's remove the food from the house. Can you have your own food in your own little mini fridge at the office so you're not going into the kitchen with the donuts? Like, how can we re-engineer the environment and take that away from big food? Because that's what they do. They do it for a reason. So flip the script and control your environment as best as possible. Bring your snacks, remove yourself from temptation whenever you possibly can. So that's all the behavioral shit of like, use a different, don't eat in front of the TV. Use a smaller fork or whatever smaller plate. Like, it's all nonsense, but it all does help. And I say nonsense because it's not going to help you get over the fact that your mother was a heroin addict. However, like, okay, now we know what to do. So we understand, like, all right, if I could you're not confused about what to eat or what not to eat. You have one goal, like eat a little bit less. Okay, move a little bit more. Okay, I can walk. I can do that. Great. All right, let's practice these steps so we take the environment back. That's helpful. Okay. The psychological piece. How can we get you the support you need? And there are low-fee therapy clinics that you can go to. There are communities, OA, support groups online. Get support. It's extremely important from a very positive, proactive community that wants what's best for you. Surround yourself with that. Try to cleanse and detox your relationships, which is easier said than done because you're in dysfunctional relationships for a reason. And they provide the same thing that the food provides to one degree or another, but nevertheless, that psychology piece is a big one. But this is where, personally, between you and I'm hoping that we'll see somebody like a Matt Johnson, somebody like him, try this out. Because if they're sending people to Mexico, I was just talking to our friend Brigham about this. He's like, I'm going to Mexico to do ibogaine. I'm like, are you sure? Like, I don't know that I can co-sign this. Are you positive? He's like, I'm going to document it. I'm going to do a fucking MRI on my brain. But they're doing it for heroin addicts. Our friend is not a heroin addict, so that's why I don't really love this idea. But nevertheless, and it's working. So it's extremely uncomfortable for them apparently, but it's supposedly very effective at helping people come off of heroin. What would these things do for somebody like the people we're talking about?
Yeah.
Like that psilocybin trip or that ayahuasca trip. I believe it. I'm just praying there's a day that I could try it on someone. Like, I wish there was an environment where I could take them out of the country with a guy like Matt Johnson and document it and let's see if it works. I think that it could help a lot of people. I don't know, but given all the facts and everything we've seen with other addictions and the way it helps people turn their life around and literally change their mind, I think that could be a major tool. And then the last piece is the work that you and I have to do or supporting the work that Bobby Kennedy will hopefully end up doing and Callie will hopefully end up doing is trying to change the food so they aren't allowed to put this shit in it and make it as addictive. They aren't allowed to put that stuff in your kid's school because they negotiated a contract with the public school system so that it isn't everywhere and that it isn't highly addictive. Like, we got to try to support people in that way And you could also play a role in that by being an activist, writing your senator, complaining to your school that you don't want this stuff in it and you want them to do different contracts for food, being crazy like Vani Hari. And I mean, this bitch is a dog with a bone. Oh my God, poor Kellogg's.
Right?
The scariest woman on the web. Jason's scary too, but like, whoa. And they've been extremely effective.
She's a savage.
And there's an animal. She scares me. And he's like, if we could just impact their bottom line at Kellogg's a few percentage, for whatever the fucking basis, but whatever it is. I don't speak, hedge fund guy. Nevertheless, if we could lower their bottom line or decrease their profits by a small margin, it would get them to change tomorrow. So if we vote with our dollars where we can, or even just strategically attack these behemoths, so you buy like General Mills crappy cereal instead of Kellogg's, so that Kellogg's changes and then we go boycott these guys. That's genius.
You leverage them against each
other.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. Yeah, like they're scary fuckers though.
That's apparently what's happened. Apparently, like they emailed GM.
I know.
General Mills. And they got a response like overnight. Whereas
yeah,
Kellogg's,
let me give you a little thing about that. Here's why I'm not optimistic, and I hope I'm wrong.
At the end of the day, it's still cereal. Like
it is garbage,
right?
But so General Mills worked with Biggest Loser, and we would always have to do these integrations. And once again, I would like have a tantrum, and we don't get paid for them. You'd have to do them because they paid the show. So you'd have to be like, I just fucking love Jenny O's sausage, or oh my God, the gum. Like, oh, this is the best spearmint gum. And it's like filled with sucralose. And I didn't eat that stuff. Like, I wrote a whole book about not eating that stuff called Master Your Metabolism 15 years ago. And so General Mills ended up asking me to come in, and, they're like, we're working on all this stuff and look at our food development and we, the beetle coloring and all that stuff. Nothing happened. Little did I know that shit was for Canadians. Like, nothing. So, and I went to Subway and like, would you take the high fructose corn syrup out of the bread? And then maybe Max, I hope so. I wasn't powerful enough on my own by a long shot. But I think the coalition that Callie has put together behind RFK and the position that RFK is in is, that's a whole different ballgame. So I certainly hope so. I really do. I've never been more optimistic, but we've both lived in this world for a while, so it's like cautiously optimistic.
That's always that's my perspective, is that I have no idea how things are going to shake up over the next 4 years, and I'm not directly affiliated with the movement or anything like that.
Me either.
But yeah, I think cautious optimism is the way to proceed.
Yeah,
like nobody, right. Like politicians are going to politician.
You're so right.
Right. But, but the way that Callie's described it, which I fully agree with, is that this is an opportunity, and it might be the best opportunity we ever
get.
Yeah.
Yes.
We ever get. Exactly.
We may not get another, given the state of the state, literally.
Seriously.
So I agree with you.
What was it like for you going from like relative obscurity, doing your own thing, a trainer in Los Angeles, to like overnight being one of the most recognizable faces in the country?
Something, we kind of wasn't overnight. And the reason I say that is because we were featured so sporadically on the show in the beginning. It wasn't about us. It was an hour-long show. So it had 45 minutes because of all the commercials. And then it had a bunch of beats. In other words, like, okay, so we have a challenge. And that's like 15 minutes. And then I can't even remember. Then there's a temptation. Those ended up going away, thank God. And then there's a weigh-in. And we weren't even at the weigh-ins in the beginning. So we'd be on the show for like 2 minutes in the beginning, even though you'd be there all week killing yourself. But you'd really only exist in like last chance workout. Then the show became 2 hours. And then we were at the weigh-ins. And then, they had time for more workouts. So then we ended up gradually being a significant part of the show. Like, I didn't even think they were going to bring us back after season 1. I thought it was like, okay, the next 2 trainers, and let's just rotate the trainers, like Dancing with the Stars. I had no idea. So it was a pretty gradual process. And at the end of the day, like, you're not Julia fucking Roberts. You're just a trainer. You're not that special as a reality TV. The one thing you do acclimate to is the haters And in the beginning, it's interesting. I was talking to Callie, and he's like, it's just so dark and so upsetting because it's totally new for him to have haters. I'm like, you're doing great.
He has haters.
They called you this? This is amazing. He's like, what do you mean? Like, he's such a soft soul. And he's a crazy fighter. But deep down, he's just this like really sweet guy who did a mushroom trip with his sister and wants to use all of his skills and his sister's skills to change the world. And then when people are vicious, he can't wrap his head around it. And I'm like, this is fantastic. Like the fact that they hate you, you're doing everything right.
Absolutely.
And so you do have to acclimate to that though. And Brigham asked me that same question because now it's happening to him. And he's like, how do you deal with this? I'm like, oh my God, I love it. Just means you're doing all the right things.
There are people that are professional haters on social media, and more often than not, they have
bots,
backgrounds in academia. Well, yeah, there's some bots.
Yeah,
but you tend to see the same people that just they seem to just relentlessly fight for the status quo.
I know. I think they're getting paid to do it. Those
Probably.
people, yeah. I'm pretty sure that like you saw that whole thing in the Washington Post about how they were paying the registered dietitians to promote junk food.
Yes. I mean, how is that not illegal? It's
I have the answer for you. So, okay, this is kind of a funny story. Kind of. It might be funny for you and I because we are familiar with the players here, but nevertheless, there was a panel on GLP-1 drugs at Eudaimonia, this health thing that we were all at. And Callie was like, I can't believe they don't have the Rockstar team on this panel because he wasn't with me on the panel. So I was like, oh, hold on. I'm going to make a phone call. So I'm like, my friend Callie's going to be joining me on this panel. Like, you don't have a choice about it. But there was a doctor, and I cannot, forgive me, not only can I not remember his name, it's probably best that I don't. He runs, I guess, this is all you really need to know. And he may be a great guy. I really don't know. He runs like the Tough School of Nutrition. And I guess he was single-handedly responsible for the Food Compass.
Okay. I know who you're talking about. He's actually very moderate, and he seemed
fairly reasonable, but so Callie was like, this guy is responsible for the Food Compass. I'm having to meditate all night. I'm going to have to hold myself together. I don't know if and he's like, this is a bad guy. You know the guy that said cereal was better than beef? That's this guy. And I was like, oh shit. So we're walking out on stage and he turns around, he looks at me and he goes, go hard. And I ended up going hard. But I can't even remember how the fuck we got here. But I can't even remember the question you initially asked me. But the long and the short of it is, how is that legal?
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, they get into there's a whole thing now going on backstage that Mark Hyman is trying.
The drama.
Oh my God, Max, it was ridiculous.
To have been a fly on the wall.
It was like he's trying to kind of like broker this peace treaty between Callie and this doctor. And the guy did seem moderate on the panel, but I went hard. You know,
he's a nice guy.
Callie, Callie's like, go hard. So I was like, I'm really sorry that I was so mean to you, but Callie said you're an asshole. And I was like, so, I hope that's not the case. Have a nice life. Anyway, the one thing that they did get into that they ended up progressing beyond was the advertising dollars spent by food companies and pharma companies, and like, how are they allowed to do all of these things and market this way and blah, blah, blah. First Amendment, it cuts both ways. So he was essentially saying that you'll never be able to block any of those marketing messages or the advertising or any of the stuff because ultimately they will win in a court of law utilizing the First Amendment.
So, but they do have to make disclosures, right? There are FTC guidelines.
I mean,
one would assume.
Are there?
I don't know. Well, I guess
not really. Think about it. Our buddy Senator Johnson just told me that they disclose like a fraction of the side effects. I mean, it's not FTC, I guess, but a fraction of the side effects of a drug.
Well, you're right. There are ways around. Like if you were promoting a product, you would have to disclose that you're promoting a specific product. But they can find other ways of influencing the discourse, right?
It's how they pay for it. So in other words, like if they're not sponsoring the post, but maybe they've given you a research grant.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're making money reviewing for their journals. Or maybe you're consulting for their company. That's how.
Got it. That makes sense.
That's how.
Right. Yeah, like if
so you can't stop the narrative. In other words, like they can say anything they want to say. and which arguably is good because they want to take away the narrative about things that are true. And we've seen that during COVID. But they get around it because they're taking money. I'll give you an example that I don't even really want to give, but oh dear. Okay, so this is a perfect example. I launched a line of fitness equipment at Walmart. Walmart has a pretty big lobby. And if there was ever a situation where, let's say, I mean, I would do the right thing, but nevertheless, they have a pretty big lobby. And if, let's say I lied about something that Walmart did with the food or something, this is fake, but a hypothetical scenario, I'm getting arguably paid by Walmart, right? So if they did something wrong and I don't mention it, or I manipulate it
right
to a different, I know what it is. Okay. So it has to do with, oh God.
You can't lie about a product.
No, but you can take money. Okay. So for example, one of the people in Washington told me, you can't lie about a product.
Because that would be false advertising.
True, but there are ways of manipulating that.
And if you're being paid to promote a product, you can't promote it in a way that falls outside of the FDA's guidelines, right?
What fucking guidelines though, Max?
Well, you can't make false claims about like a supplement.
You can't make
treating,
false
preventing, or
claim.
curing.
No, and they will go at, but have you noticed a lot of people do and then they just fight the lawsuits? That's the game. So for example, I invested in a company called Alliant Naturals, and you're not allowed to say brain fog. You're literally not allowed to say in a post, like, I struggle with brain fog, this helped me. Cannot say it because you're ripe for someone to go after you. However, so what? They go after you, you pay them off. It's like 10 grand, 20 grand to settle it. It's not the government that goes after you. It's some fucking lawyer that's just having a good time making some cash. Nobody at the FDA, they're not coming after you.
Interesting.
At least not to, I could get my business partner on the phone, but they're like, don't do it. Cause this is a company that's like small, family run. And they don't want to take the risk, but Monster Corp, I'm like, well, how come so-and-so company does it? And they're like, they just pay it off.
Yeah.
There's a lot of loopholes, but you're allowed to say, here's the even crazier part is you can say, oh my God, like there's some version of that, but not the exact, like, oh, improved digestion, but you can't say like bloating or constipation. I don't know, babe. It's all so fucking
it's weird.
Full of shit and nuanced and gray, and you can take money from Walmart and then like lie about something involving just a it had to do with the food stamps program, the Walmart issue.
Yeah.
They were a pretty big lobby. And I think that it was mentioned to me that supermarket lobbies did not want soda off of Snaps. So like, is there a day now where I would have to have that conversation with the hand that feeds me?
Do you know that 10% of Snap spending goes towards soda?
I do, because of you and Callie.
That's wild.
But there are a lot of lobbies behind wanting that there.
Right.
And one of them, I have a
National
business
Beverage
deal
Association, all that stuff.
But you can see and I like to think of myself as a pretty decent person. So it's like, I've purged my soul here if we lose the deal. Like, I would love to work with Walmart and be, they're a health person. That'd be great. But you can see how maybe if I was, I'd be so afraid to burn that bridge. And I do have a product line in there that can go out tomorrow. I don't give a shit. Whereas if you fight to remove soda from Snaps, it's like, hey, it could even be a omission, right? Like, hey, just don't do it. Just don't fight about that. Just stay out of the argument. Just don't make people aware of it.
Well, it's like the supermarkets or whatever. Like, Walmart's not the problem.
No, but the grocers do want it.
Well, yeah, but I think
they're definitely not the problem. You're not the problem, Walmart. Thank you for keeping my dumbbells. But yeah.
No, but they're not. Like,
but they do want it, Max. Supposedly they're a pretty big lobby, and they want to keep it on
that makes
there.
sense.
Not Walmart per se, but that lobby.
I think that people should have the choice to buy and eat whatever they want. Maybe when the government's involved, when it's like taxpayer dollars,
That's the argument. It's not the nanny state. It's the fact that hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars are going to poison people.
Exactly.
By the way, the craziest part is...
And the healthcare system is already overburdened. And like these are products that don't do anything good for your
just
health.
bad.
You're right. It's just bad.
Just
the
bad.
Sugar-sweetened beverages.
So it's like they give our tax dollars to Big Ag to make the high fructose corn syrup that goes in the soda. And then they give our tax dollars to Big Food to give it to marginalized communities who then get sick. And then they now want to give our tax dollars to the drug companies to give those marginalized communities GLP-1 drugs. Come the fuck on.
Wild. But I think the most nefarious aspect is when these companies are influencing experts.
Yeah.
Particularly those on social media who tend to reach younger audiences. Like it was recently revealed, I think also by the Washington Post, that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they don't just take gifts from these ultra-processed food manufacturers, but they own stocks in the companies themselves. So they have a vested interest in these companies increasing profit.
It's legal.
Year over year.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's nuts.
It's insane. I was working on something, looking at the different laws, like a book proposal that looks at the different laws that have occurred since the 30s, since the beginning of what was the Farm Bill ended up becoming. And I sent it to my editor, and it has all the different facts of like 8,000 grants that go to the NIH are conflicted. And she's like, well, how are they conflicted? And I thought, okay, well, we know the obvious stuff of like they get royalties off of the vaccines, for example. The individual researchers and the NIH get royalties off of the drugs they work on. And, you know, sometimes they own stock in some of the companies for the drug that they're promoting. But it's so deep and it's so crazy. And it's so much of the research that essentially crafts our diet, our healthcare system, everything.
Yeah.
Like this is why people have to take agency on their own, but people like us have to try to expose it enough so there's enough outrage that hopefully it gets changed, or at least something's
got to be done. What are you working on these days? Like, what is other than the activism and the potential to be involved in everything that's going on now at an even higher level? Like, what's your day to day?
My day to day has been actually trying to expand the podcast into other areas outside of health. And I don't know why. You know what I think? People are like, why are you talking about Russia, Ukraine? And I'm like, I don't know. Here's the reason. I think if I had to put it in a nutshell, is because all the corruption that's happening in our business that you and I know about, with like the health government agencies and the revolving door employment with private industry and government, is happening throughout our entire government.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. And now you feel like once you've seen this one aspect of it and you realize that it's not just this slice of cake, it's the whole cake. You're like, all right, we gotta, I want to be a part of exposing all of this.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to do a lot of that on the podcast, for better or worse.
You're brave.
Sometimes it just chokes out. That's it. So I'm brave, but Bill Maher is like, go ahead, do it. I'll start a Substack, or I'll put you on X, or I'll figure it out. Just go do it. He essentially said, I want to weaponize you by making you cancel proof. But you can tell that they win sometimes when you put a show out. Like you and I were talking about this episode I just did with Scott Horton on the role that the West has played through our interventionist foreign policy with Russia and Ukraine. And it bothers the shit out of me because I have kids and I'm a little worried about World War III. And when you start to realize who's profiting off of this and how corrupt it is, you want everyone to know what the fuck is actually going on. In the same way that somebody at Pfizer goes to the FDA and then goes back to Pfizer, works at Pfizer, sends a drug to the FDA, approves the drug at the FDA, goes back and works at Pfizer and has stock at Pfizer. Somebody who works for the State Department goes and works at Lockheed Martin, goes and works at Boeing. It's the same game.
That's crazy. That's what it seems like.
I
don't know enough about that,
Max,
but
it's the same game.
If what's happening with the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry is also happening with these war machines,
it is the exact same game.
That's terrifying.
Although, like, literally YouTube choked that entire show and killed all the notifications on it, there's no question whether you think we should be fighting Putin or not. When you find out who's profiting and how they're profiting, like, I'm not going to tell you what to think about it. That's not my job. And I certainly don't know, actually. I'm going to bring somebody on to tell you what to think. Or, I'm sorry, what to think about. Not what to think, but what to think about.
Or how to think about it.
Right. It's like, well, okay, did you know that after World War II, we promised, that we made all these promises and we did this and that. And we decided we had to fight the Cold War. So we built this war machine, and then the military industrial complex rose. And here's Eisenhower saying, like, be careful of this. This is going to get us into a million wars. Anyway, this guy tells this whole story, and it's like, we promised not to expand NATO after Gorbachev took down the wall. We added 14 countries and put it on the Russian border. Like, it just, but why? Well, here's what I've extrapolated so far, and this is totally irrelevant. Delete the whole thing. But I mean, this is what I've taken away from some of these interviews I've done is that, okay, whether I was interviewing Patrick Bet-David or Scott Horton or whoever, okay, all these billions of dollars, that's not going to Ukraine. That's a loan to Ukraine. And then we're buying jets. So you're siphoning off all of the taxpayer dollars to buy all these weapons from the military industrial complex, who they get their check. They make a ton of money. Those go to Ukraine, but Ukraine owes that money back. So now Ukraine, by the way, guess who got the contract to rebuild Ukraine? BlackRock and JP Morgan for $400 billion. Okay, then guess who owns all the defense companies? Lockheed and all that. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Okay. Then now Ukraine has to put up all their resources for auction because they owe us so much money. So their minerals, their farmland. And it's like, okay, well, who ended up buying the farmland? Monsanto. Not all of it, I think a percentage of it. But when you go back and you listen to these guys, you're like, okay, hold on. So a handful of companies got exceedingly wealthy, and you siphoned off billions of dollars from American taxpayers, and you definitely had a million off-ramps with this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and you didn't take any of them. And now you've got submarines off the coast of Miami with nuclear weapons. Like, yeah, I'm fucking alarmed.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, like, I don't care about that Twinkie. I'm like, never mind. Max will handle the Twinkie. Like, this is insane. Who's that? Like, it's just
Jillian Michaels, political pundit. Ladies and gentlemen.
The political total novice. That's the thing. Like, I know nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason that it might be working when the algorithm actually allows people to see the show, because I think most of us really just, it's like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Well, there's no doubt that there are those who stand to benefit from us being in the dark about certain things, right? My lane is nutrition, and that's clearly the case there. Like, if you didn't know anything about nutrition, well, there's a lot of people who are going to profit by an American public that believes that Lucky Charms are better for you than eggs, or that Frosted Mini Wheats are healthier than ground beef.
Right.
Food, it's going to make the food industry happy. Ultimately, it's going to make the pharmaceutical industry happy. The healthcare industrial complex very happy.
Insurance is going to be thrilled because they end up actually profiting. That's,
Ignorance can be extremely profitable.
It's crazy. And I think there's just that part of me that if you can expose it and there's something we can do about it with regard to either how we vote, even for senators, what your representatives, not just the president. I mean, do we really want this war? Is there a way out of this? I think giving people a different perspective is important. So for some reason, I felt really compelled to do that lately. I don't know why. There are people that do it really well, but the issue with the people that are experts sometimes are so hard to follow.
Yeah.
So I think being a complete idiot about it, knowing absolutely nothing, is that you can kind of make these experts take it down to the studs. So I don't know, I've been doing that. We have a line of equipment at Walmart. We have a fitness app. That's all great. And we strategically invest in better for you companies like Galia Naturals and Thrive Market and what have you. But there's nothing really, working on this book idea to show how the government was corrupted. But I don't know. I don't really care if people.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like an old fat cat. Like I just sort of do what I want now. I have a roof over my head. I got a car. I can feed my kids. I'm like, there's nothing I'm really like. We're doing stuff, but nothing I feel like overwhelmingly compelled to have you purchase.
I get it. Well, this was super fun. I mean, man, what a 180 from where we started the episode, talking about levers for fat loss. Ended up
because I know that stuff.
Solving the Russian-Ukrainian crisis.
Like, oh my gosh, Max. And I know. I guess I'm just fascinated by all the stuff now that I don't know. I spent so many years trying to understand the stuff that we now know.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, what don't I know? And unfortunately, there's quite a bit. So
100%.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you're human, as am I, and we're curious beings. There's a lot, I think, of a lot's changed over the past decade. Like we're now in the era of long form, ultra authentic conversations by way of podcasts. I think the house of cards that was the mainstream media and the sound bites of information that people have been accustomed to getting. It's like the crumbs of truth that the American public have been.
I don't think that's even there anymore, though, Max.
It's not. Well, I feel like it's.
What's that something news initiative? Have you heard about that?
No.
Okay, I just made a note about this because Senator Johnson mentioned this to me. Hold on a second, and I made a note because I wanted to insert. Oh, of course, I don't have that phone on me. The other phone's in the car. I made a note because I wanted to insert. Here it is. A clip of this. So. He said that, listen to this.
Yeah. Okay,
this is going to be my last one. Hold on. I swear to God, then I'm going to shut up. Okay. God damn it. It might be on the notes at home, news anchors. Okay. He mentions, forget it. I have to put in the note, but something about like a something news initiative. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is pre-pandemic. So he says that in October 2019, there was a conference at the Millikan Institute. And in that conference, they were trying to figure out how they could implement a global vaccine schedule. And I was like, wait a second, hold on. Beyond the kids' mandated vaccine schedule, like a global, everybody on the planet has to get vaccinated for XYZ. He's like, yep. And they said the only way we could do it is a pandemic.
Whoa.
October 2019. He's like, and then they said, but how are we going to deal with the misinformation? And they formed this thing. It's in the show. It's like the Something News Initiative. And I was like, stop. What is that? And he goes, have you ever seen all of the news channels, like the montage of the different news channels saying the same exact thing? I go, yeah. He goes, that is what it is.
Wow.
It's where they're literally, here you go, read this. Like, not only is it not even like a nugget of truth slips through, it's complete propaganda.
Yeah. It's obviously corrupt.
This one's so dark. Sorry, Matt. Like, it's like.
Well, that's why.
I don't mean to be a bummer, but yeah, you're right. This is why you have this podcast.
Yeah.
That's the good side.
100%. That's what Kelly talks about when he references the fact that, the pharmaceutical companies don't just buy up the airwaves to influence consumers.
Right.
They buy up the airwaves so that they can influence the narrative. Yeah, they can influence the platforms.
100%.
So it's I think encouraging critical thinking. I mean, if that's the bare minimum that people get out of this conversation, I think that's a great thing.
I totally agree with you. Exactly. It's like, I'm not gonna tell you what to think about fluoride, but here's a couple of things to watch on it, and then you make up your mind.
Exactly.
I don't even know what to think about fluoride, to be honest, but
I avoid it.
I kind of, the here's why I
just don't think you need it. I don't
think you need it, right? The hydroxypeptide or whatever. Appetite.
Fluoride, the fluoridation of the water supply made sense. It makes sense through the lens of the fact that like most of us are eating these hyper-karyogenic diets that promote cavities.
Right.
Grain-based diets that are now saturated with added sugar and things like that. Like it makes sense to have a fail-safe so that,
Yeah, because in theory, right, you've heard that argument, But then you get to well, that's not even the most effective at mineralizing the teeth. It's this topical hydroxy apatite or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
That's in a toothpaste.
And it's safe.
You can buy on Amazon.
Your bones are literally made of hydroxyapatite. So it's like, it's not a,
see,
fluoride is like xenobiotic. Like there's no necessity we don't have a necessity for fluoride.
Isn't that crazy?
But nanohydroxy or hydroxyapatite we're literally like, I mean, it's already in us. Like our bodies know what to do with it.
See, but you would get the exact opposite narrative on the news. They're like, this bastard's going to take away our fluoride.
That's what I don't understand.
Like, oh my God.
Well, but the thing is fluoride, like if you really want your fluoride, you've got options,
Right. And the toothpaste.
99% of toothpaste
Yeah,
at your local CVS have fluoride in it.
Right.
You can rinse with fluoride until the cows come home. It's there for you.
Sorry.
Right?
But you're right.
But the fact that people don't have the option, right? That it's just like we've
Exactly.
inherited municipal water supplies that have this potential endocrine disruptor.
You also
in it.
tell them the truth. You've done the homework, and you're giving them the alternative perspective than what they're getting from their local news channel or whatever it may be.
Man, I love this. So fun. I feel like we could keep going on for hours, but
You know why this was so off piece? Because I have not had coffee, so I apologize to you. They're like, okay, she's having a complete psychotic break.
we love it. We love it. We would expect nothing less.
Please don't. Yeah, I mean,
Remind where can listeners find you on social media? How can they support your work, buy your books, all that stuff? And then I've got one last question for you.
yeah, just at Jillian Michaels.
Love it.
Yeah, it's like my number one thing that I care about is really just the podcast, because I'm trying to have those kinds of conversations with people like yourself and get out information that, by the way, may not be right. I don't know. Maybe Putin does need to be punched in the nose, but at least these kinds of conversations about, the vaccine schedule and fluoride, like these things affect your life so dramatically. At least gather all the information, hunt and gather for different information, and then choose. So that's really my at Jillian Michaels.
Well, I just think it's like the questions that people feel pressured to sweep under the rug. Like there's stuff there. Like those are the questions that we need to be asking.
I know.
Like if there's a question that you're not supposed to be asking, that you've got to like whisper, like there's stuff there that you're likely not supposed to know.
100%.
Is my perspective. Like we should be able to ask all the questions.
Yeah. And the more they silence it, the more conspicuous it is.
Yeah. Now more than ever. The silence is deafening.
Michael Schellenberger said this to me, and then I swear to you, I'm going to shut up. So I had him on my very first show that was on YouTube. And we were talking about the WPATH file dump on gender affirming care, but he was also explaining how he had released the Twitter files and subsequently the Facebook files. And this is before Mark Zuckerberg came out and admitted that he was forced by the Biden administration to silence dissenters around the COVID vaccine. And Facebook said to the government, they're like, the more you make us silence this stuff, the more suspicious people are becoming, the more attention you're drawing to it. So, hopefully, if anything, it backfires and it makes people more hungry for information, for the questions that they see aren't being asked or answered.
Yeah. Love it. So true. Jillian Michaels, what does living a genius life mean to you?
Oh my gosh. It changes when you get older. So I think living a genius life really is about being a good parent. You start to realize that it isn't all about you. You're just a stepping stone to something greater. And so for me, that's where my head's at these days. It's just like, I want to get to the end of my life and feel like I didn't completely fuck up my kids. And then on a personal level, though, it all falls into place. Like you lead by example for them. You do what you love to do. You role model health and wellness and healthy relationships. So all those things sort of fold into being that good parent because you are ultimately their primary role model.
I love that. I'm not there yet in my own life, but I
it's so great not to be. It is so great not to be, because once you do, man, you realize you are just like a cog in this evolutionary wheel, and you are just there to serve these little humans that are coming up behind you and make the world a better place for them. And one thing Sebastian Junger said to me, because he had this near-death thing. Oh yeah, you run. Yeah. So you guys cross paths at the podcast, and he has this near-death experience, and the one thing he comes to acknowledge at the end of all of it is that it's his obligation to die to make room for his kids and his kids' kids. And the mind frame of that, in other words, is that you sort of take on this different role of like, okay, I am literally just a stepping stone to your growth and excellence and whatever you're going to contribute to the world. But before that, it's awesome because it's just like you sleep till 11. Yeah. Do whatever the fuck you want. It's amazing. Wait as long as you can.
I like that advice. Well, thanks so much for coming in. This is so fun. I'm so excited for our conversation, the one that we had on your podcast to run.
I'm going to make you motivate people in January.
Amazing.
New year, new you.
New year, new you. Yep. Well, thanks for coming out. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.